Hi, Embryona. My parents once told me I wasn't CEO material. They said it like they were handing me a napkin, not cutting me out of a legacy. But I didn't expect the sign outside the company or family company to lose my name overnight. Or the boardroom seat I earned, handed to my brother-in-law while I still handled payroll. They erased me from the will, then from the website, then from the photo on the wall. But when my 8-year-old niece asked if Uncle Orion was the boss now because he was just better, I realized this was just about business. It was a quiet execution. And I stayed silent until the day I didn't. What would you do if your own family rewrote your story without telling you? You can usually feel a room before you understand it. That day, I felt the shift the second I stepped into the boardroom. It wasn't just quiet, it was rehearsed. A silence that had been passed around and perfected, like an inside joke I wasn't part of. Elgin was already at the head of the table, his posture too relaxed, his gaze too neutral. His coffee black, no sugar still steamed in front of him. Fresh. He'd been here a while, long enough to settle, not long enough to drink. Across from him sat Isolde, expression unreadable, her pen poised as if she were about to sign a ceasefire agreement. Others lined the table, shuffling papers, murmuring pleasantries, pretending to review the agenda. But no one looked up. Not at me. Then I saw it. My nameplate, the brushed steel rectangle that had anchored my seat for the past 6 years, was gone. In its place, a newer plate gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Orion Feldman, CEO. Just like that. I froze, one foot slightly ahead of the other, still holding the lukewarm coffee I'd picked up from the break room, as if that version of the morning still existed. The room didn't wait for me to speak. Elgin cleared his throat. "We've made a change," he said, in the same calm, measured tone he used to suggest sandwich orders on Thursdays. "Orion will be stepping in as Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately." Orion rose from his chair, smooth as theater. His smile was polished, too wide, too bright, the kind people practice in front of mirrors. "I'm honored to take on this role," he said. "Looking forward to collaborating with all of you closely." He meant over you, but no one blinked. I didn't speak. Couldn't. My body went through the motions. I moved toward an empty seat near the window, opened my notebook, clicked my pen. I didn't ask for my seat back. No one offered it. No one said my name. The meeting rolled forward like a train I was no longer allowed to board. Financials, forecasts, client targets. Orion stammered through numbers I knew by heart projections I had built, tested, refined. Isolde corrected him once or twice, gently, like she was easing a child through a piano recital. I kept my face blank. I wrote what I could, though I wasn't sure why. Out of habit, maybe, out of dignity. My pen scratched quietly against the paper, the only sign I was still there. When the meeting ended, I didn't wait. I stood, walked out without a word, straight to my office. Closed the door. The sound of it shutting seemed louder than it should have been. Everything looked the same, but nothing did. The books on my shelf, arranged by color. The succulent someone gave me when we signed our Series B. The ribbon-cutting photo, framed in matte black wood. All of it remained, but it wasn't mine anymore. Not really. It was a shrine, a fossil. My breathing turned shallow. I needed air, but not the kind you get outside. I needed movement. I needed to prove I still had control over something, anything. I walked to the admin print room, telling myself I'd forgotten a printout. A reason. Any reason. The room was empty. The copier hummed softly, its screen blinking idle. On the corner of the table, a folder lay unattended. A single sheet stuck out slightly, the corner bent like someone had pulled it out halfway, then thought better of it. Internal Transition Planning Executive Reallocation. The words landed like a punch to the throat. I opened it, slowly, carefully, like peeling back a wound. Inside were spreadsheets, rollout schedules, press templates, pre-written emails, detailed steps mapped out week by week, names assigned to tasks. My name appeared once, under logistical coordination. No input, no acknowledgement, no gratitude. The first document was dated 3 months ago. 3 months. That entire time, I'd been running full tilt pulling late nights, onboarding new staff, smoothing over client concerns, defending budget allocations. I'd turned down 2 vacations, missed my nephew's piano recital, stayed through a holiday snowstorm to finalize Q1. While they had been planning my exit, I felt myself sink onto the low cabinet beside the printer, the cold metal pressing into the backs of my legs. I couldn't tell how long I sat there, maybe 5 minutes, maybe more. The folder rested beside me, heavy with betrayal. Eventually, I stood, walked back to my office, and turned off the light. For a moment, I just stood there in the dim, staring into my own outline against the window. There was no breakdown, no yelling, just stillness, like the inside of a locked vault. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't about growth or direction or vision. This wasn't a mistake, I whispered to the dark. It was a strategy. And then I pulled out a blank notebook, the one I kept tucked in the back drawer, the one I hadn't opened in years. I uncapped my pen, and I started writing again. Not about projections, not about meetings, but about the truth. Mine. Because they may have taken the title, but I still had the story. They thought I would leave quietly. They didn't realize I was starting something. I didn't slam doors. I didn't yell. I wrote. I arrived early that morning. The parking lot was still half empty, the sun just beginning to warm the tinted glass on the west side of the building. I sat in my car for a moment, trying to decide if I felt more numb or more focused. The line between the two had blurred since Tuesday, but I walked in, head high. Like nothing had changed, because outwardly, nothing had. My badge still beeped green. My title still read COO in the HR system. My name was still on the directory, but I could feel it like a coat that no longer fit, but you wear anyway, hoping it might still button. In my office, I opened my laptop and waited for the familiar loading sound. Then I saw the email. Subject line, welcoming our new CEO, Orion Feldman. It was from Isolde, sent to all staff. The newsletter was glossy, corporate perfect, complete with a high-res headshot of Orion in the executive suite, sleeves rolled just enough to seem approachable. His innovative vision will guide Andersen Group into a dynamic future, it said. There was a paragraph about forward momentum, a section about global potential, and a quote from Elgin about Orion's strategic clarity. There wasn't a single mention of me. Not a line about continuity, or thanks, or my 12 years of infrastructure work. I scrolled to the bottom. The sender list included me. They knew I'd see it. That was the point. A knock at the door startled me. My assistant, Erin, peeked in, eyes unsure. Hey, I didn't write the newsletter, she said quickly. Marketing drafted it. I just forwarded it like I always do. I nodded. You don't need to explain. But we both knew what had happened. I was no longer the subject of the sentence. I wasn't even a comma. I had become the silent space between paragraphs, present but unacknowledged. An hour later, someone from facilities stopped by. Hi, Briona, he said, half smiling. Quick heads up, they're moving Orion into the West Conference Room. The exec suite next to it will be converted into his private office. I stared at him. That room used to be my workshop, my overflow war room. I used to write on the whiteboards until my wrists hurt. He waited for a response. I gave him one. I'll move my things out by the end of the day. In the lobby, I needed air. Needed to move. I took the stairs instead of the elevator 4 floors down, then walked out toward the front desk, where natural light poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I stopped short when I saw it. 2 men in uniforms were adjusting the main lobby signage. Ladders were up. Dust was settling on the tile. The company name, Andersen & Daughters, had been polished away. In its place, Andersen Group reimagined for the future. It was subtle but deliberate, like someone erasing a middle name from a tombstone. I stared as one of the workers peeled off the last of the lettering. He didn't notice me, or maybe he did and didn't know what to say. A security guard behind the desk gave me a nod. The polite kind people give to someone who no longer holds power, but still walks like they might. I walked slowly back to my office, each step echoing. I thought about the first time that sign had gone up, gold leaf letters. Darla's, hand on my shoulder, whispering, "You'll carry this farther than we ever dreamed." I believed her, but now there was no shoulder, no words, just emails I wasn't meant to answer and signs I wasn't meant to stop. Back in my chair, I didn't cry. That part of me had been squeezed dry long before. I opened the newsletter one last time, reread it, then deleted it. Then I created a new folder on my desktop, Operations Log Legacy Notes. I began dragging documents into it, internal process maps, contract playbooks, revised budgeting templates, all mine. I knew where everything lived, every structure, every sequence, every shortcut that made this place function behind the scenes had my fingerprints on it. They thought I'd disappear. No. I was archiving the foundation they forgot. I knew, no, this wasn't just replacement. It was erasure. And I was done watching. I wasn't ready to confront them, not yet. But I wasn't about to play along either. So when Darla texted that we were still having our usual Saturday dinner, I didn't cancel. I went. Driving to the house in Edina felt like sliding back into a skin I'd already outgrown. The brick looked the same, the shrubs were trimmed just like always. But the second I stepped through the front door, I felt it, that tight, staged energy. The kind you feel at funerals when people smile too much to avoid crying. Darla was in the kitchen, humming something cheerful and slightly off-key. Isolde's laugh floated from the dining room, sharp and performative. Orion's voice followed, a smooth baritone about new branding strategies. It was like they were filming a commercial and forgot to tell me I was no longer part of the cast. I excused myself to the study, while Darla stirred a pot of something meant to smell like comfort. The room still smelled faintly of her lavender oil diffuser and Elgin's old cigar box. Same leather-bound books, same faint scuff on the floor, where his office chair always dragged too wide. But the photos had changed. One frame, newer than the others, caught my eye. Gold-edged, clean, centered perfectly on the shelf. It was a picture from the annual company Galeone I had planned down to the napkin colors and AV scripting. I was there that night. I remembered the exact dress I wore, the extra flats in my tote bag for when the heels wore me out. I remembered coordinating Orion's talking points backstage while he practiced in the mirror. But I wasn't in the photo. The image showed Elgin, Darla, Isolde, and Orion standing in front of our branded step and repeat backdrop, arms linked, all teeth and confidence. I had stood just off to the right in the original. I remembered because I had handed Orion a lint roller moments before it was taken. Yet in this version, I was cropped out, literally. The right edge of the photo was sliced clean me sleeve, my shape, my part in it, gone. Darla appeared in the doorway just as I leaned closer. "That's the best shot we had," she said. Her tone light, her smile breezy, like it hadn't just landed a punch. You know how those event photographers are, always cutting people off. I turned and offered a practice smile. Sure, but I wasn't stupid. I wasn't edited out by accident. I was edited out because I didn't fit their version of the story anymore. Dinner was bland. Not the food. Darla's sweet potatoes still carried the same nutmeg-heavy charm, but the conversation. It was like background noise written by an intern. Isolde led the room like she was hosting a podcast. Elgin offered the occasional grunt of approval. Orion talked about his upcoming interview with a regional business journal, how the timing couldn't be better for the rebrand. They spoke as if I hadn't just been scraped from the company wall. At one point, Isolde lifted her wine glass and said, "It's so great to finally have a face people trust at the helm." I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because something inside me quit and sharp clicked into place. I had been trying to understand what this was. Now I knew. They weren't just choosing someone else. They were choosing to forget I had ever been there to begin with. Later that night, in the room I used to sleep in during summers home from college, I lay on the guest mattress, staring at the ceiling fan blades slowly circling like they always did. My old bookshelf was still intact, but my framed degree had been replaced with a photo of Isolde and Orion at a startup conference. I picked up my phone and opened a note. Just 2 words. Proof matters. Because one day, someone would challenge the version of this story they were so carefully curating. And when that day came, I wouldn't be erased, it'd be undeniable. I wasn't lost. I was being buried, neatly, politely, and I wasn't about to let them finish the job. Monday morning started like it always did. I reviewed my notes, skimmed the weekly operations checklist I'd prepared, and gathered the folder I'd updated late Sunday night more out of habit than duty. That quiet part of me still hoped someone would notice I hadn't stopped working, hadn't stepped aside. But I knew better. The boardroom on the executive floor looked strangely quiet as I approached. No sound of laptops booting, no shuffle of coffee cups on the long mahogany table. I checked the time. I was early, but not by much. The meeting had always started at 9. I opened the door anyway. The room wasn't empty. Orion stood at the far end, clicker in hand, mid-slide. His voice dropped mid-sentence when he saw me. Isolde sat near the center, jaw tightening so slightly it was almost unnoticeable. The rest of the room followed suit, eyelets like dropped glass. No one said anything. No one offered a chair. I scanned the space. My usual seat, too, down from the head, was occupied by a junior marketing manager I'd mentored last year. She had the decency to look away. On the far wall, the screen displayed a new quarterly flowchart, a structure I recognized, one I built. An intern, no older than 22, stood awkwardly to the side and gestured toward a plastic stool near the trash can. "You can if you want, I didn't want." I stood. Watched. Orion cleared his throat. "Let's continue," he said too loudly. As I was saying, our Q3 strategy integrates a fresh operational funneliner, tighter touchpoints, simplified back-end management. He clicked forward. A new slide appeared. Color-coded boxes, precise arrows, department overlaps. All of it looked familiar. Too familiar. I'd drawn that exact workflow 3 months ago. My layout, my terms. Even the color scheme matched the custom palette I'd created for a client-facing deck. He hadn't changed the margins. No source credit, no acknowledgement, not a word. The room nodded along. Someone asked about analytics load. Orion answered with buzzwords he barely understood, repeating phrases I had coined. And when he stumbled over a metric, Isolde stepped in, smoothly adjusting the phrasing, handing him a term I'd used in our old strategy session. I scanned the room for a single ally. Not one person met my eye. At the end, Orion beamed. "That concludes the operational portion. Let's move to media." No one clapped, but no one questioned him either. After they adjourned, I waited until the last intern shuffled out. I walked to the whiteboard on the side wall, normally wiped clean between meetings. Today, it held 3 bullet points in dry erase ink: vendor streamlining, calendar consolidation, and account pivot logic. My handwriting. Still there. They hadn't even bothered to erase it before calling it theirs. I didn't speak. Didn't ask for an explanation. Instead, I pulled my flash drive from my jacket pocket, walked to the central console, and downloaded the full slide deck. Quietly. Efficiently. Back in my office, I set the flash drive on my desk and opened my notebook. I wrote 1 sentence in black ink, each word as deliberate as a signed check. Next time they use my work, they'll pay licensing. Then, I flipped the page and began a list. Everything that still ran because of me: projects, systems, clients, templates. Every foundation Orion now stood on had my signature buried in its seams. I would excavate them all. I wasn't looking to win a fight. But I wasn't planning to lose quietly either. The moment he called me too emotional for strategy, I knew he underestimated the one thing I never advertised: restraint. And that mistake was going to cost him. It started with a calendar ping at 7:12 a.m. Subject line: Stakeholder Review Room 4C. Sender: Isolde. No message, just the slot. It wasn't a standard invite, those came weeks ahead. This one was surgical, timed, precise. I stared at it for 5 seconds, maybe less, then clicked accept. The meeting was set for 11:30. By 8 I was at my desk, going over our last quarterly operations plan, margin projections, budget overruns, any lever I could pull, to remind them I was more than just an outdated title. At 10:15, I printed out my own report, labeled it in plain Helvetica, reality check. When I walked into room 4C, Orion was already standing at the front. Isolde sat directly to his left, flanked by 2 junior directors. The room was fuller than expected, 3 board members I hadn't seen in weeks, and a few senior managers who normally skipped these unless donuts were promised. "Glad you could join us, Briona," Orion said smoothly, gesturing toward an empty seat like it hadn't been saved just seconds earlier. I sat down. No handshake, no small talk. He launched into his presentation. "As we enter the final stretch of Q3, we're refining our narrative," he said, sliding through mock-ups of marketing blurbs, influencer headshots, and color-coded outreach tiers. The voice is younger, the tone decisive. We're removing friction. I held my tongue until slide 7. That's where the fantasy started unraveling. He described a streamlined vendor pivot model. His words. My strategy. "Quick question," I said, keeping my tone even. "How are we protecting against Q4 vendor backlog if you're dropping the redundancy cushion?" He paused, just for a beat, then smiled like a pastor who'd been asked about sin at a wedding. "I appreciate your passion, Briona," he said, eyes flicking toward the board, "but sometimes it's hard to take criticism seriously when it's emotionally charged." The air left the room. Nobody laughed. Someone coughed short, awkward, desperate for release. I didn't blink. "I'm sorry," I said, standing. "Would you mind if I clarify 3 items in your deck?" Orion shrugged. "Go ahead." I reached into my folder, pulled out the reality check packet, and laid it flat on the table. "First," I said, "the redundancy cushion isn't theoretical. It saved us $1.2 million during the February vendor fallout. Second, the friction you're referencing is actually a contract safeguard section 4B, paragraph 2, put in place after the Charlotte project almost defaulted. Third, and most important, emotion didn't write that policy." I did. I let that settle. One of the board members shifted. Another nodded faintly, eyes scanning my sheet. No one rushed to defend me, but no one defended him either. After the meeting, I left without gathering my things. I didn't need to. I knew what I'd brought to the room, and what I'd left there. Isolde caught up with me halfway down the hall. "Briona," she said, voice low. "That wasn't personal. Don't make it bigger than it is." I stopped, turned. "If it gets any bigger," I said, "it'll break your glass office." She didn't reply. Back in my office, I slipped off my shoes and sat quietly, pulled the flash drive from my coat pocket and plugged it in. Replayed the clip I'd recorded during the meeting. My voice, measured, clear. His? Smooth at first, then slippery. I saved the file under a new folder. Undermined publicly v1.wav. I stared at the screen. It didn't scream. It didn't threaten. It just existed. And that, I knew, was enough. The file sat quietly on my desktop, but it was the loudest thing in the room. They wanted silence. What they got was structure-papered, stamped, and backed by law. The message came in just before lunch. I was skimming my inbox, mostly vendor replies and auto notifications, when I saw the name. Carl Tillman, retired accountant, used to run our financial back end during the rocky years before the modernization. I hadn't spoken to him since the restructuring, but his email was short and clean. "I have something you'll want to see. Hard copy only. Meet me in the lower lot in 30. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my coat, told Aaron I was stepping out for a few, and walked 2 blocks to the side parking structure. He was waiting in a dusty Buick, engine running. Didn't even look up when I slid into the passenger seat. He handed me a tan folder. "Confidential capital contributions." "Read it later," he said. "You didn't get it from me." Back at the office, I locked my door and opened the file. Page 1, a ledger entry. Year 2019. Line item $275,000. Memo. Emergency bridge OPEX buffer. My name was typed cleanly in the original contribution column. Page 2, a follow-up memo. Attached amendment. It had been relogged, folded into the General Executive Reserve, then reassigned recredited under Orion's financial backing, leveraging a clause I vaguely remembered signing in the early days. I had contributed a six-figure lifeline when the company was weeks from collapse, and now it sat on someone else's record as proof of leadership investment. I felt my stomach tighten, but I didn't panic. I got up, crossed the hall, and walked straight into the legal archives room. The lighting in there was always dim, the carpet just a little too thin. I sat down at the old research terminal, logged in, and began pulling up the original agreements. The clause was buried deep. Nestled under contingency consolidation, it granted discretionary fund reallocation under executive title transitions with no required notification to secondary contributors. Technically, they hadn't broken the rules, but they had bent them so far the paper should have snapped. I took photos, all of it, printed 3 copies, saved one to my drive, left nothing open on the screen. As I was packing up, I checked my inbox again. That's when I saw it, subject line, Ops timeline, eyes only. It had been CC'd to me accidentally. A thread between Orion and Isolde. 5 emails deep, strategy talk, meeting prep. But then, there it was, clean and sharp. She's not a threat. She'll get tired and walk. I sat there for a long moment. Reading it, rereading it. I didn't respond. I didn't forward it. I downloaded it quietly, saved it in the same folder as the audio clip from the stakeholder meeting. Then I stood up, walked calmly back to my office, and wrote a single-line email to Orion. Per protocol, I am initiating a formal audit of all executive ownership transfers dated FY 2021 onward. I hit send. 10 minutes later, I heard a door slam across the hall. Hard. No one said anything. But even through the glass, I could feel the shift. For the first time in weeks, I felt the ground under me settle. They hadn't just crossed a line. They'd handed me the pen. That evening, as the sky darkened behind my window, I opened a new digital vault on my hard drive. Named it Foundations They Forgot. Inside it, I placed 3 files: the investment ledger, the email thread, the audio file. I stared at the folder icon for a long time. Then I opened a blank document and began writing a legal draft that would make them remember. They'd built a legacy on my silence. Now it'd use their own signatures to rewrite it. But before Monday arrived, before I made it official, I had to survive Sunday. It was Isolde's idea of family brunch at her place. No business talk, she'd texted. Just waffles and peace. I almost declined. But I wanted to see their faces. I wanted to feel what they looked like when they pretended we were still whole. Their house was bright, unnaturally so. Everything was curated, the playlist low and inoffensive. The scent of citrus candles thick in the air. Isolde buzzed between the kitchen and the patio table like she was auditioning for a hosting segment on morning TV. Orion played tag in the backyard with our niece Lila, who wore a unicorn headband and sticky maple fingers. Darla was already seated, pouring coffee like it meant something. Elgin, as always, was buried in his Sunday Times, reading as though the world depended on his silence. I took a seat quietly. No one asked about my week. No one mentioned the audit request. The table filled with food and empty conversation. Isolde talked about flooring samples for the office remodel. Orion mentioned how press opportunities were ramping up, which made Darla nod like she'd just seen a prophecy fulfilled. Then came the question. Lila, mid-sip of orange juice, looked up at me and asked, Aunt Briona, is it true you're not working at the company anymore because Uncle Orion is better at it? Time didn't stop, it tripped. Isolde's face froze mid-smile. Orion chuckled and looked down. Darla set her napkin gently on her lap. Elgin didn't move. I looked at Lila. Her question wasn't cruel. It was curiosity raw, honest, echoing what she'd heard at dinner tables or behind closed office doors. That was the worst part. I smiled gently. "Excuse me, sweetheart," I said, rising. I found the bathroom, locked the door, sat on the edge of the tub, and let my fists press into my knees. Not because I wanted to cry, but because I needed to hold something still, anything. They had rewritten the story so thoroughly that even an 8-year-old knew my chapter had been erased. I didn't stay long after that. I made some polite excuse about a contractor coming to look at the pipes in my building. No one asked if it was true. By evening, I was back in my apartment, my coat still on, boots leaving a trail across the hardwood. I didn't take them off. I opened my laptop and checked my messages. There it was, a LinkedIn message from Claire, an intern from 5 years ago. "Thought you'd want to see this? It's going viral." A link followed. I clicked. The post didn't have a byline, it simply read, "The woman who built a legacy and watched it be rebranded." Underneath were 2 paragraphs. One described a female executive who'd laid the operational foundation for a mid-size firm. The other described how her contributions were absorbed, her title reassigned, her presence vanished without conflict, only silence. It didn't say my name. It didn't need to. The comment section was a cascade. Former employees, vendors, anonymous profiles I didn't recognize, but I recognized the voices. She trained me. I still use her hiring process. We never missed a deadline until she stopped managing timelines. Funny how success looks like the guy who showed up last. I sat back. The light from the screen flickered across the framed certificate above my desk, the one they had once insisted I hang in the lobby. I stared at it and felt nothing. Then I hit print. I walked to the kitchen, pulled the magnet off the side of the fridge that once held the old company org chart, and replaced it with the post. Underneath, I wrote in permanent marker, "Let's see who shows up when I finally claim myself." The boardroom felt colder than usual that morning, but maybe the chill wasn't in the air, it was in the way no one met my eyes. In the way even my own hands trembled slightly as I rested them on the polished table. I hadn't said a word since entering. Neither had my attorney. He sat to my left, calm and unreadable, dressed in a charcoal suit that carried the weight of seriousness, of truth. Across the table, Orion looked far too comfortable for someone who should have been nervous. One leg crossed over the other, fingers steepled in forced ease, lips curled just enough to make me want to walk out before it even began. But I stayed seated. I waited until the room settled, until the eyes on me began to shift from curiosity to discomfort. Then, slowly and deliberately, I laid down 5 sealed envelopes, one in front of each board member. The shuffle of paper was the only sound for a moment. "Elgin," I said quietly, addressing the oldest board member directly. "You once told me something I've never forgotten. You said, paper only matters when someone else can read it. So I brought copies. They looked down. Some blinked. Others opened their envelopes without hesitation. Inside were the certified documents, the amended version of our late father's will, the one submitted quietly 2 years ago, the one that removed my name entirely from the ownership clause, without my knowledge, without my consent, the one that conveniently transferred majority shares of Anderson Group to Orion and Isolde. I never signed off on this, I said clearly. And I was never notified this revision even existed. Orion's composure cracked ever so slightly. He adjusted his tie and cleared his throat. "This feels like a misunderstanding. You know how these legal documents are. The phrasing, there's always room for interpretation." "No," I replied, my voice steady and low. "What you misunderstood is that paper leaves trails." I tapped the table twice. My attorney reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small speaker. He pressed play. The boardroom, still stiff and cold, was suddenly filled with Orion's voice, confident, smug, from the last closed-door stakeholder meeting. "Sometimes it's hard to take criticism seriously when it's emotionally charged," he had said. The second recording followed immediately. Isolde's voice, clipped and dismissive. Don't make it bigger than it is. It's done. When the final audio faded, I handed out one last Documentea printout of a viral LinkedIn post. No names were mentioned in the post, but it had over 400,000 shares, tens of thousands of comments. Anonymous, yes, but everyone in the industry knew exactly who it was about. The room was silent. You could hear the hum of the AC, the soft shuffle of someone's nervous foot beneath the table. No one rushed to apologize. No one argued. But something shifted. Then, finally, a voice broke through. An older board member, soft-spoken, respected, and rarely involved in conflict, cleared his throat. "We owe you more than we've ever admitted," he said, "and perhaps more than we can repay." Orion didn't say a word, not even to deny it. I stood, my hands no longer trembling. "You don't need to fix what you broke," I said. "You just need to stop pretending it never happened." No one tried to stop me as I left. Downstairs, someone had planned a birthday celebration for Orion. Cupcakes, gold balloons, and an awkward rendition of Happy Birthday rising from the open floor. I walked through it unnoticed. Or maybe just unacknowledged. A woman tried to hand me a plate with a cupcake chocolate with gold sprinkles. I took it, smiled, said thank you. Across the room, Orion was cutting into a sheet cake. His name was spelled wrong Orion. I didn't correct it. As I exited through the main lobby, I paused in front of the company sign mounted on the marble wall. Anderson Group. But not for long. I'd already submitted the facility's change order that morning. Installation was scheduled for Wednesday. The new signage would read, Anderson and Legacy Partners. When the facilities manager had asked me what Legacy Partners meant, I gave him the simplest answer I had. It means no one gets erased again. That night, I sat at home at my dining table, alone. No phones ringing, no voices justifying betrayal. Just silence, warm lighting, and the hum of my own breath. I pulled out a clean sheet of branded stationery, my branding, my name, and began writing. A single clause. Legacy isn't what we leave behind. It's what we refuse to let be rewritten. I signed it. No co-signers. No need for witnesses. Just me. That was the point. Closure doesn't always come with peace. Sometimes it arrives with boundaries, documents, and a door only you can close. And sometimes, closure doesn't need a crowd. Just a pen. And your own name, written in full. Mine. The plaque outside my office wasn't just metal. It was a mirror-sleek, brushed steel, no name in bold font. Just a quiet logo, etched deep with intention. And if they came looking for answers, they'd see their reflection first. But not everything needed to be reflected anymore. Some things could stay behind the glass. Not hidden, just no longer invited in. 2 weeks had passed since the boardroom fell silent, and the news broke like glass under pressure. Long enough for headlines to fade, for inboxes to return to normal, for LinkedIn posts to cycle out of relevance. I didn't clarify anything. I didn't write a thread or repost articles. I let the buzz settle and the whispers take over. People always filled in the blanks with whatever made them most comfortable. Let them. While they speculated, I built. My new office didn't look like mush, at least not to them. A second-floor loft tucked just south of downtown. Exposed beams, tall windows, uneven wood floors, and no receptionist. No Art Deco lobby. No sleek conference rooms with glass tables, just clarity. Inside, the space was open, still half empty. ID furnished it slowly, deliberately. A deep green velvet couch it found second-hand, but loved instantly. A standing desk I had assembled myself over one too late night. A coffee pot that only made enough for one. And a single frame hung neatly on the brick wall above the desk. Inside the frame was the viral LinkedIn post, the one that sparked everything, printed on clean, matte cardstock. Beneath the post, in my own handwriting, I'd added one line in black ink. We don't disappear, we get redrawn. It wasn't a slogan, it was a reminder. For me. For whoever came next. And they did come quietly, steadily. Not because of my last name, Not because of family legacy, but because of the work. Founders trying to rebuild after being overlooked. Women trying to re-enter spaces that had spat them out. People who didn't want motivational speeches. They wanted frameworks, systems, solutions. It was a Thursday afternoon when my phone rang. The number was familiar. Darla. "We're having a small dinner Sunday," she said. Her voice calm, rehearsed. "Just family. No agenda." I didn't respond right away. I could feel her discomfort filling the silence. "You can leave early, of course," she added quickly. "Like that might make it easier." "I'll come," I said. "But one condition." She waited. 1 hour. No company talk. No updates. Just dinner. She agreed without argument. That surprised me. Sunday came. The Wren house looked the same as it always had, tasteful, towering, untouched. But I had changed, and when I stepped through the front door, I felt the shift immediately. The dining room hadn't gotten smaller, but I no longer tried to fold myself down to fit inside it. Dinner was fine. No champagne toasts, no side glances, no backhanded jabs disguised as concern. Isolde talked about a contract she was working on for a luxury resort. Elgin asked if I was keeping busy. I told him yes. No one asked anything deeper, and maybe that was a gift. But near the end of the meal, after the plates had been cleared, Elgin excused himself and left the room. No one followed. When he returned, he was holding something, a frame. It was the gala photo, the original one, the version that still had me in it. He didn't say anything, just walked over to the wall near the staircase, the spot where the cropped version had once hung. He raised the frame, adjusted it until it was straight, then stepped back, hands at his sides. He didn't glance my way. Darla did, just for a moment. Then she turned and began gathering the last of the glasses, like nothing had happened. I didn't thank him, but I didn't look away. Later, as I helped carry a tray of dessert plates into the kitchen, Isolde brushed past me at the sink. She didn't speak, didn't apologize, didn't offer a bridge. We didn't need one. Some distances aren't meant to be crossed. At the front door, I reached for my coat. Darla stood beside me. Her hand hovered, like she wanted to say something, maybe touch my arm, but she didn't. "I'll stop expecting you to understand," I said quietly, "if you stop pretending you already do." She blinked once, then gave a small nod. Not agreement, just acknowledgement. That was enough. Back in my apartment, I turned off the overhead lights. Let the lamp by the window cast its soft glow over the hardwood floors. The city beyond shimmered quiet, alive, pulsing with energy I didn't need to chase anymore. I sat at my desk, the one I'd built with my own hands. I opened my notebook, flipped to a fresh page, and wrote, "They couldn't give me what I needed, so I became what I needed." I closed the notebook gently. Not everything had healed, but everything had moved. And for now, for the first time in a long time, that was finally, blessedly, enough. Hi there, I'm Aileen. 15 years ago, my parents cut me out of their lives, told everyone I walked away, but I didn't. They pushed me out, quietly. They erased my name from the will, faked a DNA test to say I wasn't my mother's daughter, and gave my future to my sister. Now I've returned, not for revenge, but with receipts. They invited me back for a wedding, but they didn't expect me to show up successful, or worse, for them, unafraid. And when I spoke, the whole room fell silent. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, weighty, and so pristine it didn't look like it belonged in my mailbox. No return address, just my initials. A.S. Inked in the kind of handwriting I hadn't seen in over a decade. Elegant, controlled, familiar enough to freeze me mid-step in the hallway of my apartment building. I stood there for a moment, blocking the doorway, groceries hanging from my wrist, my heart not racing, just holding. It wasn't fear. It wasn't curiosity. It was recognition, like someone whispering my name in a language I'd spent years forgetting. By the time I got inside, I already knew what it was. Not because I'd received anything like it before, but because no one in my family sent anything without a purpose. I set the bag down, peeled the flap back, and there it was, an invitation. Hand-pressed gold trim. Grand Solace Hotel, Seattle. Delphine Shipman and Kenneth Bianchi cordially invite you to their wedding. Delphine, my sister, Kenneth. The man who once looked me in the eye, in front of 6 venture capitalists, and reduced my work to cute potential. That was 2017. I was 28, hungry, pitching a community-based health model for underserved cities. He was polished, powerful, and dismissive. "You've clearly put thought into this," he'd said, tilting his head like I was a middle schooler reciting a science fair speech. "But maybe give yourself more time. You're still figuring out who you are." No investment, no follow-up, just that look, the kind you give someone you've already written off. And now he's marrying Delphine. I dropped the invitation on the counter and stared at it like it might catch fire. No personal note, no explanation, just a request for my presence, as if the last 15 years hadn't happened, as if I hadn't been cast out of that family like a stain on their perfect white linens. I hadn't heard from them since the day I walked out of our Chicago home with nothing but a duffel bag and a voicemail from my mother telling me not to come back unless I was ready to behave like a real daughter. Whatever that meant. And now this, not an olive branch, not even a breadcrumb. This wasn't forgiveness. It was strategy. They needed me there. For appearances, for optics. Aileen, the forgotten sister, reappearing in the background of some posed wedding photo to sell a fantasy of reconciliation. I picked up the invitation again. Delphine's full name, Dr. Delphine M. Shipman, embossed in cursive. She was always the star, the one who smiled just right, who sat with her knees crossed and her voice steady, who wore ambition like perfume. And me? I was the storm they kept out of the photo frame. I texted Ethan, my husband. "I'm going." He replied in under 10 seconds. "You sure?" I didn't blink. "Yeah, it's time." I moved to the closet, reached past the everyday blazers and weekend sweaters, and found the dress I hadn't worn yet. Navy silk, sharp neckline, backless, nothing showy, just presence. The kind that walks into a room and silences it without saying a word. By the time the sun dipped behind the skyline, I was still standing there in front of the mirror, barefoot, hair pulled back, holding that envelope like a chess piece. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel sadness. Just a click. That sound in your gut when you know exactly what they've done. They thought I'd show up and smile. Thought I'd nod politely and pretend everything was healed. But they forgot one thing. I didn't survive them. I outgrew them. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. The dress hung back on its hanger, untouched. I'd laid the envelope down, but it kept pulling my eyes from across the room like a lit cigarette smoldering on a table. I wrapped myself in my robe, moved to my desk, and sat, barefoot, still in control, but with something old stirring inside me. Next to my keyboard sat a chipped blue mug, half full with cold coffee from hours earlier. Beside it, a flash drive with a cracked case, the one I'd carried through 3 apartments and 2 cross-country moves. Most people wouldn't notice it, wouldn't think anything of it. But to me, it was the only thing I'd managed to save from that year. The only proof that once, I built something that mattered. I plugged it in. The folder I hadn't touched in over a decade flickered to life, before it all fell apart. Inside were lecture notes, data sets, draft models, and one presentation deck titled Nutritional Access Equity. I clicked it open and let the slides scroll on their own. Each chart, each bullet point, each line of logic was mine, and yet none of it carried my name anymore. It started in my second year at the University of Illinois. I was 19, bright, over-caffeinated, running on ambition and ramen noodles. That project, my project, was my heart. I'd spent 6 months developing a community-based nutrition framework using real-world surveys from low-income neighborhoods across Chicago. It was messy, idealistic, maybe even naive, but it was mine. One Friday, Delphine dropped by my dorm unannounced. She said she was checking in, but her tone was too sweet, too rehearsed. She brought takeout and a bottle of wine, sat on my bed like it belonged to her, and asked about my work. I was flattered. Delphine never asked me about anything before unless it involved cleaning up her mess. I showed her everything, my code maps, the logic trees, the way I modeled behavioral change through community kitchens. She leaned forward, smiling wide. "You really did all this?" she said. I thought she meant it. I thought for once she was proud of me. I couldn't have been more wrong. The following week, my files vanished from the shared campus server. I'd backed up most of them, but not the latest version. I remember staring at the blank screen, refreshing it over and over, as if it might magically reappear. Then the email came through the student network. "Congratulations to Delphine Shipman, recipient of the Women in Health Science Award." Attached was a photo of her standing beside the dean, holding a certificate with the title of my project printed in bold. I didn't cry. I just stood there frozen. At the Spring Scholarship Gala, Delphine gave a speech. She wore a soft lavender dress and spoke like she belonged in the world of microphones and applause. "This project was inspired by the invisible struggles in our own communities," she said. "We don't need to reinvent nutrition. We just need to make it reachable." My words, line for line. I sat 3 rows back with a plastic name tag that read, "Volunteer." Our parents stood near the front, clapping like they'd raised a savior. My mother leaned in toward me, voice clipped. "She just works harder than you, honey. Maybe take notes." I didn't respond. What was there to say? From that point on, I began to unravel quietly. A month later, a post appeared on the student blog, anonymous, titled "The Real Aileen Shipman." It painted me as manipulative, dishonest, a compulsive victim. Said I'd faked projects before, that I didn't belong in the program. There was no author, of course, but the tone, the phrases, the timing, I knew. Delphine didn't just take the spotlight, she burned down the stage behind her. After that, my email dried up. Classmates stopped replying to project threads. A professor pulled me aside and said gently, "You may be right, Aileen, but right doesn't always win. Perception does." I nearly dropped out that semester, but I didn't. I buried myself in work, rebuilt my model from scratch, took night shifts at the hospital cafeteria to pay tuition, alone, without applause, without credit. Now, 15 years later, that blog post is still up, still searchable, still poisoning the well. I took a screenshot, saved it under a new folder, receipts. Then I reopened my original research file and sat with it, not to grieve, not this time, but to remember what they built on top of me. Not just a lie, but a career, a reputation, a public image that never belonged to her. She didn't just plagiarize a project, she rewrote my role in the world. The glow of the screen still lingered on my retinas, even after I shut the laptop. I sat there, unmoving, until the shadows in the apartment had shifted from indigo to black, broken only by the blinking streetlight outside my window. A cool draft passed under the window frame, and suddenly I needed to move. I stood up slowly, crossing the room toward the filing cabinet shoved beneath my bookshelf. It had been years since I opened that bottom drawer, the one I once swore I'd never touch again. But pain has a way of loosening locks you thought you'd sealed shut. The key was still taped behind the bookshelf, right where I left it 6 apartments ago. My fingers found it blindly. The drawer creaked as it slid open. Files sat in messy stacks, covered in dust and time. I flipped past leases, medical receipts, expired tax documents, until I saw it. A plain white envelope, no return address, no letterhead, just my name typed in a font too formal, too calculated. I remembered the day it arrived, spring 2010. I was back home from school, waiting to hear from the estate attorney after my grandfather passed. Instead of condolences, I received paperwork. Inside the envelope was a copy of his revised will, dated just 2 months prior, and my name was gone, cleanly, like it had never belonged there in the first place. Clipped to the back of the will was something worse, a DNA test. I hadn't touched it since. Now I unfolded it with a steadier hand than I expected. It read, "Maternal match inconclusive." The test listed Maureen Shipman as the alleged mother, my mother, except, according to this document, there wasn't enough genetic evidence to prove we were related. At 19, it wrecked me. I believed it. Why wouldn't I? It was printed. It had lab logos. It was official looking in the way lies sometimes are. But now I saw the holes immediately. The lab was called Pacific Diagnostics, a name I hadn't thought about in years. I pulled out my phone and ran a quick search. Closed in 2016, no corporate listing, no phone number. Nothing but a fraud scandal article buried on page 4 of the search results. Shell Lab, I muttered and texted Ethan. Need your help tracing an old clinic. Possible wire fraud. He replied within minutes. You finally opened the drawer, didn't you? I'll start digging. By midnight, he sent me a link to archived financial records. There it was, plain as day. A $4,800 payment from Maureen Shipman to a numbered P.O. box registered under a Nevada address, 2 weeks before the DNA test was issued. So no, it wasn't just a cut from the will. It was a deletion. They didn't just disown me. They orchestrated my erasure. I sat down, knees pulled up to my chest, the DNA report resting in my lap. The rage didn't come yet, just a cold, expanding clarity. It felt like staring at my reflection and realizing it wasn't a mirror at all, just another window they'd painted black from the other side. As I sat with that truth, I reopened my browser and returned to the student blog, the one that had never been taken down. I typed the title into the search bar. The Real Aileen, Liar, Thief, Victim. There it was, anonymous, sharp, full of bite without any proof. It didn't need proof. It just needed to sound believable. You know how she is, one line read, always playing the wounded bird to get sympathy. A phrase Delphine used once in an interview, word for word. That passive-aggressive, Midwestern-taught poison. Polite on the surface, lethal underneath. Of course it was her. She couldn't confront me directly, so she killed my reputation in whispers. And people believed it. Because they wanted to. Because it was easier to doubt a woman without power than one with a press kit and a polished smile. As I compared the post's date with the one on the DNA file and the estate paperwork, something sickening clicked. All within the same 3-month window. The will, the blog, the test. It wasn't a coincidence. It was choreography. One aimed at making sure I wouldn't just be dismissed. I'd be discredited. Because what's easier than cutting someone out of your life? Making sure no one asks where they went. Now they want me back, to pose for photos, to smile in press releases, to be proof that time heals. But they didn't invite me because they missed me. They invited me because they need me to stay quiet. I traced the edge of the envelope, now creased and softened by time. Then I picked up my phone and began recording, my voice calm. This is for record, 2010, altered will, same quarter, falsified DNA, anonymous blog post, linguistic match to Delphine, conclusion, pattern confirmed, erasure was intentional. I paused, then added one more line. This time I'll be the one writing the narrative. I didn't tell Ethan where I was going. He'd ask questions I didn't want to answer yet, not until I was sure. I just said, it's something I need to do alone, and booked a one-way to Chicago. It was still dark when I left San Francisco. By the time the plane touched down in Illinois, the sky was streaked with pale sunlight, barely warming the sidewalks downtown. The city hadn't changed much. It still smelled like early morning exhaust and damp stone after a late summer rain. Familiar, but no longer mine. I didn't go home. I didn't even look toward the old neighborhood. Instead, I took a rideshare straight to a modest corner office in the West Loop. I'd called ahead, booked a generic document consultation under my maiden name. I didn't want to give anyone a reason to cancel. When I stepped into the lobby, the woman behind the desk barely looked up. Mr. Penn will be with you shortly, she said. Penn. His full name was Julian Penn. Back then, he was a junior associate, green, bookish, uncomfortable in expensive shoes. I remembered him because he was the only person in that stuffy estate meeting who looked at me like I was human. 10 minutes later, he opened the door himself. He paused when he saw me. No handshake, no smile, just a quiet, resigned exhale. Aileen, he said softly, it's been a long time. We sat in a tiny conference room with a window that faced a brick wall. He didn't ask why I was there. Maybe he already knew. I slid 2 documents across the table, the revised will and the DNA test, both printed cleanly, both dated and notarized. I waited. He didn't touch them. You knew, I said. Didn't you? His jaw tightened. He stared down at his hands, thumbs pressed together like a man bracing for confession. I was 26, just got promoted to junior partner. That file? It didn't feel right. I flagged it. I asked questions. I leaned in, voice calm. And then? They told me it was a family matter. Said I was overstepping. 2 days later, I was pulled off the case. You were my last legal defense, I said, my voice now razor thin. And they bought your silence for the price of a title. He flinched, but didn't argue. I watched him sit with the guilt, let it steep. I wasn't here to punish him, not really, but he needed to feel what I'd felt all these years, overlooked, overruled, erased. I had no power then, he finally said. But you do now, I replied. Silence filled the room like fog until he reached for the papers at last. He scanned the signatures, the dates, the lab name. This wasn't even a real clinic, he muttered. No, it was a front, and Maureen paid them. He closed the folder and set it down. Why now? Because they invited me back, I said flatly, and they expect a smile, not a reckoning. Julian hesitated. What do you want from me? I didn't smile. I didn't blink. You helped erase me, I said. Now you're going to help unerase me. A long breath passed between us. Finally, he nodded. Send me everything you have. I'll start building the file. I stood to leave. And don't warn them, I added. You owe me that much. I won't, he said. But Aileen, this won't be easy. I didn't look back. It never was. By the time I boarded the return flight, the clouds had thickened over O'Hare. The turbulence matched the slow storm inside me, but I wasn't rattled. Not anymore. For the first time in years, I wasn't angry. I was aligned. The betrayal still pulsed under my skin, but it no longer controlled me. I had the truth now, and a witness. That changed everything. I watched the skyline fade behind the plane window. The city that broke me was shrinking beneath the clouds. They tried to silence the story. But now, I had someone ready to listen. I came to find a witness. I left with an accomplice, and that changes everything. The wheels touched down in San Francisco just before 7 p.m. The sun was setting, painting the glass towers in warm gold, while the rest of the city cooled into gray. I didn't waste time. I bypassed the carousel, took a rideshare straight home, and barely greeted the doorman. He looked up from his crossword to wave, then blinked when he realized it was me. Back in my apartment, I didn't take off my shoes. I walked straight to the hall closet, crouched behind the coats, and pulled out a lockbox the size of a bread loaf. Its metal was scratched, the handle was loose, but the key, Ethan taped it under the windowsill years ago, still fit. The lid creaked open. Inside, between old tax folders and faded birth certificates, was the file I hoped I'd never need again. 2 wills. One dated spring 2009, one dated fall 2010. I laid them side by side on my desk. The 2009 version had my name on it, clearly, boldly. My grandfather's final words in black and white. Aileen shall retain partial interest in the Shipman farmland and related assets. Irrevocable. The second will didn't mention me at all. Same paper, same font, almost. But if you looked closely, the margins didn't line up. The signature page, slightly crooked, as if copied and pasted. The notary seal was blurred, and the scanned initials on page 7 looked more like someone traced them by hand than signed them under pressure. Before Chicago, I would have doubted myself. But now, with J. Penn's quiet admission echoing in my ears, I didn't flinch. This wasn't just a mistake, it was a fabrication. I stared at the line that used to bear my name. Then I heard his voice again, my grandfather sitting on the porch with a wool blanket across his knees, handing me a lemonade I didn't want. This land'll always be part yours, no matter what your mother thinks. Now Delphine's name was listed as sole heir. They didn't just erase me, they handed her everything, then smiled like it was fair. I scanned both wills, named the files clearly, then crafted an email. Subject, estate revision attachments. To message, undo it quietly or I will do it publicly. You have 48 hours. Aileen. I didn't send it from my main account. I used a clean alias and encrypted the files. I'd learned that much from years of watching legal chaos unfold behind press headlines. You never swing unless your footing is solid. The reply came faster than I expected, under 2 hours, from Delphine. Hey, wow, a bit dramatic, don't you think? Let's talk before this gets messy. No need to involve strangers in family matters. I'm free Friday. No apology, no denial, just fake sugar over a blade. I didn't reply. Maureen, of course, said nothing, not a word. Not even a bounced-back error message. Her silence was an answer. They didn't think I had the courage or the proof or the spine, and that's where they always got it wrong. I stood by the window, watching traffic pulse below, then turned back to my desk. The time for quiet was over. I created a new folder labeled Phase 1, Inside, the wills, the DNA test, the blog screenshot, notes from Penn, the money trail from Ethan's research. I exported everything to a password-protected drive, then attached a compressed version to an email for Noelle Weaver, the only journalist I trusted with this kind of poison. I didn't hit send. Not yet. But my finger hovered over the key. Let them wonder how loud I'm willing to get. They spent years perfecting their version of me. Docile, forgettable, erased. But I've kept every receipt, every bruise, every scar. They buried my name in ink and inheritance. But I learned to read between the lines. And now I write the next one. The next morning, I didn't start with coffee. I didn't even glance at the kettle. I sat down at the kitchen table surrounded by old records, paper and digital. Printouts, USB drives, a half-dozen open folders, receipts folded so many times the ink was starting to fade. I had everything spread out like puzzle pieces, not yet assembled but already telling a story I couldn't unsee. Ethan walked in just as I was organizing a pile of tax returns. He still had that just-showered look, damp curls pushed back, hoodie clinging to his shoulders, but there was nothing relaxed about his face. He wasn't even pretending to play it cool. "You need to see this," he said. He slid his tablet across the table like it was carrying bad news. No preamble, no easing into it. Just hand it over the storm and let me stand in the rain. I turned the screen toward me and forgot how to blink. At first, I couldn't process what I was looking at. It was a document, several actually. A spreadsheet linked to a set of IRS filings tagged to my Social Security number. Income reports, consulting contracts, donations, medical equipment purchases, travel expenses, refunds, line after line, year after year. Some of it dated back almost a decade. I narrowed my eyes, heart beginning to pound against my ribs like it was trying to punch its way out. "These are mine?" I asked. But the question barely came out. I already knew the answer. Ethan nodded. "Yours. At least that's how it's been filed." I scrolled slowly, teeth clenched. Most of those years I'd been sleeping in other people's guest rooms, working side gigs to scrape by, teaching part-time, living off bulk rice and borrowed Wi-Fi. I'd never even broken 40 grand a year, and yet, according to these records, I was somehow the beneficiary of consulting payments from institutions I'd never even spoken to. Tens of thousands here, tax write-offs there, enough income to qualify for massive deductions, enough to raise red flags, if anyone had actually been looking. I kept scrolling, jaw tight. Then I saw it. More Family Foundation. My stomach turned. "They used your identity," Ethan said quietly. "Probably as a shell, or maybe a shield. Their donations, routed through your name. A few press pieces even mention you, carefully, subtly, like a myth they were keeping alive just enough to sound noble." He tapped into another document, this time a glossy internal PDF labeled Community Partnership Programs, Annual Report, page 3, inspired by Aileen Shipman's vision for equitable health access. I laughed, a small broken sound. It didn't even feel like it came from me. "That's rich," I said, staring at the words like they were a bad tattoo on the world's most dishonest body. "They didn't just erase me," I said after a long beat. "They recycled me." Ethan's voice was low. "They built a whole public image around it, around you. Quietly enough not to owe you anything, loudly enough to make people believe the origin story." I pushed my chair back, harder than I meant to. The legs screeched against the tile. This wasn't just a case of stolen work. This was full-on identity laundering. Delphine hadn't just hijacked my proposal back then. She'd turned it into the cornerstone of the Moore brand. And somehow, despite being scrubbed from the credits, I'd been kept in the picture, just enough to be useful. I pulled up the Moore Foundation website, and there it was, front page, a slideshow of curated images. Delphine reading to children in a library. Delphine in a lab coat talking to doctors. Delphine handing a novelty check to a smiling hospital administrator. Beneath it all, a clean minimalist caption, rooted in Aileen Shipman's passion for change. Click. I went to the About Us tab, and there it was again. Another lie. A fabricated quote slapped under a sepia-toned photo of a stethoscope. Health should be a right, not a privilege. Aileen S. They gave me a damn tagline. They turned me into a mission statement. I let the mouse fall from my hand and stared at the screen, every nerve buzzing like I'd touched a live wire. It's not just fraud anymore, I said. It's branding. They turned me into a damn logo. Ethan didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The silence in the room was thick enough to be its own witness. I opened a new folder on my desktop and titled it Truth Packet. Into it, I dragged every file I had. IRS records with my SSN and fabricated income screenshots of the Moore Foundation's website, front page and about section. My original research proposal, timestamped, backed up, and notarized from years ago. The two conflicting wills. The DNA report that shattered their narrative. The blog post that tried to discredit me. J. Penn's notes and emails. He'd been digging too. Once everything was inside, I copied it all to an external drive. Then uploaded it to 3 separate cloud accounts under different aliases, passwords that even I had to write down. I wasn't going to lose the truth again. Then I opened my email. To Noel Byrne. Subject, the family store you didn't know. Attachments, evidence, confidential. Body, this isn't about revenge, it's about correction. You asked me once if I'd ever go on the record. This is me going on the record. I hit send before I could think twice. Ethan walked over and rested his hands gently on my shoulders. You okay? I didn't pretend. No. He didn't push, but I was calm, more than calm. I felt clear, like some old fog had finally lifted, and I could see everything for what it really was. I'm not trying to ruin them, I said. I'm just going to make sure they can't keep lying. Because that's what they'd done, rewritten history in real time, buried the facts, polished the lie, left just enough of me in the narrative to keep their story airtight. But now I had every piece of the truth, and they'd used my name to cover their empire. Now I'd use it to take the mask off, and this time, they wouldn't get to write the ending. Seattle was gray when I landed. Typical, but it felt different this time. Like the city had been holding its breath for years, waiting for me to return not as a guest, but as a disruption. I didn't check in with anyone, no texts, no announcements, no social media post. Just me and the quiet thunder rolling under my ribs. The wedding was still 3 days away, but the war had already started, and the first blow came faster than expected. I was reviewing financial statements in my hotel room when my inbox pinged. Subject line, Urgent Mental Health Record Notification. I frowned, opened it. Inside was an email from a hospital admin I didn't know, flagged confidential. Someone had submitted a request to access mental health history related to Aileen Shipman, citing public concern for recent erratic behavior and past incidents involving manic episodes. Attached was a PDF of a psychological assessment, dated 2009, signed by a psychiatrist who, upon quick search, had lost their license in 2015. I stared at the line under diagnosis. Possible bipolar 2. Follow-up recommended. My hand didn't shake. Instead, I laughed once. Low and bitter. Of course they'd try this. I picked up my phone and called Ethan. They're going for mental health smears now, I said. It's classic. Quiet, legalish, and absolutely them. Maureen? He asked. Too strategic. Delphine. He didn't argue. The evaluation was fake, sloppy, but dangerous enough to seed doubt, the kind of thing no one questions out loud but whispers behind closed doors. I called my attorney, flagged it to the Bar Association, and sent it to Noel with the note, "They're panicking." Then I turned off my laptop, because another email had just arrived. Anonymous sender. Subject, "She wasn't supposed to be there." No body text, just an attachment. I opened it. It was a redacted hospital report from a children's clinic in Seattle, 2013. A 7-year-old boy admitted with mild asthma, misdiagnosed, given adult-grade medication, induced coma, treated and stabilized 2 weeks later. No charges. Case closed quietly. The attending physician, Dr. Delphine Gaskins. There was a second page, handwritten. I was the nurse on call. I knew the chart was wrong. I tried to speak up. They shut me down. But you can speak now. I sat still for a full minute, not out of shock, out of focus. I'd fought this entire time thinking I was up against a personal grudge, jealousy, erasure, inheritance. But this was malpractice. This was buried harm. And suddenly the stakes weren't just mine anymore. I forwarded the file to Penn, to Noel, and to a private legal investigator I'd used once during a past acquisition battle. Make sure this can't be deleted, I wrote. Trace everyone who touched this file, quietly, fast. An hour later, I was on the phone with the Washington Medical Board, filing a formal complaint. Do you have cause to believe the report is valid? The woman asked. I didn't hesitate. I have reason to believe the report is true. The silence was purchased, and more people got hurt than we know. Then I sent one more email. To Delphine. No subject, no greeting. Just 3 words. I have it. She read it within 5 minutes. Didn't respond. Of course she didn't. That night, Ethan and I sat side by side in the hotel room, the only light coming from the soft glow of our screens. You're calm, he said. I looked over at him. I'm not calm, I said. I'm committed. And that's worse. For them. Because I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was defending the truth. For every person they buried with their image, every voice they silenced with reputation, every line they rewrote with bloodless precision, they tried to erase me. Then they tried to discredit me. Now they'll have to face me. The ride to the Grand Solace felt like approaching the eye of a storm, not with fear, but with finality. I didn't feel nervous. There were no butterflies, no cold sweat, no urge to turn back. Just that strange calm that settles over you after the worst has already happened. When the fire's done burning and all that's left is what you decide to build or destroy in the aftermath. I stepped out of the car into a sunlit afternoon that felt like it belonged to someone else. The Grand Solace towered above me, gleaming like a false god. All polished glass and curated perfection, its front steps lined with white roses curling up gold-plated railings. The sound of a string quartet drifted from somewhere inside, violins tuned to the frequency of wealth. Inside, it smelled like champagne and control. Everything was immaculate. The marble floors, the uniformed staff, the strategically placed mirrors catching light just right. It was a place built to impress, to perform. But not for me. I didn't walk in like a guest. I entered like a fact. Every head in the lobby turned when they saw me. There was a moment, brief, breathless, where no one spoke. Just eyes locking onto the daughter who wasn't supposed to be here. The one they'd written off. The one they'd erased. I wore navy silk, clean lines, no jewelry. My hair pulled back, my expression sharp. The ballroom doors opened ahead of me. I didn't hesitate. As I stepped through, the room stilled, glasses hovering midair, conversations dying mid-sentence, the kind of quiet that only happens when the room collectively realizes it just became a crime scene, and the detective is holding the microphone. Delphine was near the center of it all, surrounded by donors, board members, family friends. Her expression faltered for the first time I could remember. Not panic, not fear, just a visible fracture in the porcelain she wore like armor. Maureen blinked once, composed herself like a machine resetting. Kenneth looked like he'd seen a ghost. And maybe he had. I didn't give them time to regroup. I walked past champagne flutes and stunned whispers, all the way to the front. My heels struck the marble with every step, louder than the music still playing in the background. There was a podium, a microphone already waiting. I took it. You invited me here, I said, voice even, but I brought something with me, something none of you expected. The part of the story that's never been told, at least not out loud. The projector screen behind me flickered on. Footage began to play. It was Delphine on a TEDx stage. Spotlights. Applause. Her voice polished and confident. She spoke about health equity, about systemic injustice, about data-backed change. But the words weren't hers. The research wasn't hers. The entire presentation, charts, models, even the mission statement, had been lifted, line by line, from my original files. From a proposal I wrote in a basement library with blistered hands and no grant funding. The timestamps played in the corner of the video. My name, Aileen Shipman, appeared on the original PDF cited in her presentation. The data, unmistakably from my undergrad thesis, scrolled on the screen. I let the silence settle. Then I spoke. She didn't win that scholarship, I said quietly. She didn't earn that applause. She borrowed my work, removed my name, and submitted it as her own. The room was hushed. Even the servers had stopped moving. The second clip began. No video this time, just audio. Maureen's voice, clear, cold, unfiltered, filled the ballroom. Aileen's a parasite. She drains everything around her. She doesn't deserve to carry our name. The sound system didn't soften it. If anything, it sharpened every syllable. Gasps rippled across the room. Some guests looked down. Others looked directly at me. Donors and trustees stiffened, trying to parse what this meant. The story they'd believed was unraveling in real time. I scanned the crowd. Faces turned hard, pale, suspicious. Gregory stood near the back, hands clenched at his sides. He looked down at the floor, like he couldn't bear to watch, but couldn't walk away either. Delphine stepped forward, her voice uncertain. Aileen, this isn't the place. This isn't the time, I cut in. You've had 15 years. Kenneth shifted beside her. He looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time, like the room had relit her from a new angle. You used me, he murmured. You used all of us. Maureen started toward the stage, her expression unreadable. Calm, but something coiled beneath it. I lifted a folder into view. This contains documentation of financial misconduct connected to the Moore Foundation, I said clearly. Falsified IRS activity, identity theft, and a suppressed malpractice case from 2014 that Delphine buried with legal threats. She stopped mid-step. I didn't flinch. I'm not here to fight, I said. I'm not here to yell or beg or bargain. I'm here to document. Delphine's voice cracked. You don't understand. It's exactly what everyone thinks it is, I said, louder now. Maybe worse. The final slide blinked off. The screen went black. The silence didn't. The illusion had cracked open, and what spilled out wasn't just the truth, but the rot that had been hiding behind wealth and polish. For years, they told the story without me. They scrubbed my name, my work, my voice. So I rewrote the scene. They built a stage. I stood on it. They chose the audience. I chose the moment. They used my name to build an empire of lies. And now I used it, loud, clear, and unapologetic, to burn it all down. The ballroom cleared like air after a storm. No shouting, no scenes, just silence. The kind that follows truth when it finally outruns denial. I stood still as chairs scraped, murmurs swelled, and polished shoes disappeared across the marble. Some couldn't look at me. Some looked too long. But I didn't move. I didn't need to. They'd already heard me. 3 days later, Delphine's medical license was under review. The board posted a quiet, non-committal notice on their website. The Moore Foundation froze all public-facing activity, pending compliance audit. Kenneth released a single statement. I was unaware of the extent of the misrepresentations. I've withdrawn from all family-related ventures. And Maureen? She locked herself inside the Mercer estate and declined all calls. No interviews, no public rebuttal. Because there was nothing left to spin. The cracks had run too deep. Their version of reality had collapsed in on itself. Not because I forced it, but because it was never built to hold. Weeks passed. Back in San Francisco, the fog rolled in early one Tuesday. I was on the balcony, laptop closed, mug lukewarm, sun almost gone. I played the voicemail again. You humiliated us. You'll regret this. Her voice was flat, practiced. But I didn't regret anything, because I hadn't humiliated them. They had built a house of glass and handed me a hammer. All I did was stop protecting it. No one sued me. No one apologized either. And I didn't need either one. There was nothing theatrical about what followed. No press tours, no bestseller memoir. Just space, breath, the luxury of not having to flinch. My team at the startup stood by me. Our latest pilot program got picked up for city implementation. Not because of scandal, because the work spoke for itself. One night, Miriam stopped by with a bouquet of sunflowers and a half smile. You're still here, she said, pressing the stems into my arms. I am, I answered. Still here, and still me. Ethan grilled dinner on the rooftop. We talked about nothing, about everything, about maybe getting out of town for a bit. Just us. I slept better, laughed louder, stopped bracing for the next hit. I never responded to Maureen's voicemail. Never answered Delphine's PR rep. Let them spin in silence. They never said sorry. But I didn't need them to. What I needed, and finally had, was mine again. My voice, my work, my life, forgiveness, maybe someday. But this was about freedom, and I chose it. Maybe justice isn't always about punishment. Maybe it's just about not disappearing. Being seen, finally and fully, on your own terms. I didn't share this story for sympathy. I shared it because for too long I believed silence was strength, that if I just worked harder, stayed quiet, stayed small, things would fix themselves. But the truth is, silence only protects the people who hurt you. Speaking up doesn't always change the past, but it reclaims your future. If you've ever felt like your voice didn't matter, that your truth was inconvenient or unwanted, I'm here to tell you, you are not alone. And you are not crazy for remembering what they hoped you'd forget. Some of us don't get apologies. Some of us don't get justice in a courtroom. But all of us deserve freedom, the kind you earn by refusing to disappear. So maybe ask yourself, what have you been quiet about for too long? Who told you that your truth wasn't worth hearing? Let's talk about it. If this story touched something in you, drop a 1 in the comments, or tell me what state you're watching from. If it didn't resonate, I'd still love to hear why, and where you're tuning in from. And hey, if you believe stories like this matter, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next one. Real voices, real lives, real healing. Thanks for listening. And remember, your voice isn't too loud. They just weren't ready to hear it. Hi, my name's Rowena. And 12 years ago, my family erased me like I was nothing. No calls, no holidays, just gone. Now? They're throwing a wedding like none of it ever happened. But what if I told you the bride stole my future? The groom once humiliated me in a boardroom, and my own mother forged a DNA test to cut me out of the will? The envelope didn't belong in my mailbox. Cream-colored, thick, expensive stock. My name written in calligraphy I hadn't seen in over a decade. But I'd know that handwriting anywhere. My mother's. Even if her name wasn't at the bottom of the card, her presence seeped through the ink like a warning. Inside, gold trim, embossed letters, 2 names. Callamore Desmond Hale. I stared at it so long the edges curled slightly in my hand. Calla, my sister, if you could still call her that, was getting married at the Grand Solace Hotel. That was Seattle royalty territory. Crystal chandeliers, $500 dinners, a waiting list just to breathe near the ballroom. And someone, somehow, thought I should be there. 12 years. 12 years since anyone in that family had said my name without venom. Or silence. And now, a wedding invitation? No note, no apology, no, we miss you. Just a cold summons wrapped in gold foil. Was it a mistake? Number that script was too deliberate. This wasn't an olive branch. It was a setup. I could feel it. My gut twisted as I flipped the card again and again, like maybe the back would explain why they wanted me there. And then I saw it. Desmond Hale. That name sent a small chill down my spine. I knew him, not well, but enough. We'd met once, years ago, in a boardroom, when I was trying to pitch funding for my startup. He'd been the CFO of a pharmaceutical giant, one of those smug, polished types who looked through you while pretending to listen. He told me my projections were impressive for someone so early in their journey, which was code for, "You're too young, too female, and I don't take you seriously." Now he was marrying my sister. What were the odds? Except I don't believe in odds. I believe in intention. People like my family don't operate by accident. This wasn't a coincidence. It was bait. Glittery, gold-embossed bait. And they didn't think I'd bite. But they forgot one thing. I'm not the same girl they shoved out the front door, with nothing but a duffel bag and a broken heart. That girl's dead. I tossed the envelope onto the counter and walked to the window. Seattle's skyline blinked back at me through the rain-streaked glass. I could see the outline of the Grand Solace from here. Funny, for years I tried to erase them from my life. Now they wanted me back just long enough to smile for the cameras and whisper behind my back. I felt my chest tighten, but it wasn't fear. It was something colder, something focused. They didn't know who I'd become. They didn't know that I'd built something from the nothing they left me with. That I had a husband who believed in me when no one else would. That I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was winning. I opened my closet, reached for a sleek black dress I'd been saving for something that mattered. I ran my fingers over the fabric, clean lines, powerful silhouette. It wasn't bridal, it was war-ready. My phone buzzed, a text from Jareth. "You okay?" I stared at the screen for a second, then typed back, "I'm going to the wedding." Pause. "You sure?" he replied. I didn't hesitate. It's time. This wasn't about closure. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about reclaiming my name, my story, my damn place in the room. They wanted a spectacle. They'd get one, but not the kind they were expecting. I zipped the dress, stepped into my heels, and looked at myself in the mirror. Polished, composed, ruthless. I wasn't going to beg for a seat at their table. I came to flip the damn table over. That night, I couldn't sleep. My body was still, but my mind wouldn't shut up. Jareth was out cold, but I sat by the window, city lights flickering below, clutching the invitation like it might bite. So the next morning, I did what I always do when my head gets too loud. I walked. Pike Place was just waking up, crates clattering, espresso hissing, the air thick with fish and bread and tulips. It should have calmed me. Instead, it took me back. Back to being 16, second-hand cardigan, hoping someone, anyone, would believe me. It was the day my mother's diamond necklace disappeared. I wasn't supposed to be in her room. Calla left the curling iron on again, and I got blamed. I went in to unplug it. That's it. 10 minutes later, my father's voice boomed through the house. "She was the only one in there," Calla said, fake tears and all. My mother didn't even pause. "You've always been selfish," she snapped, "and now this." But my dad, that look in his eyes, like I was something he couldn't wash off. "Disappointment follows you like a shadow," he muttered. They never found the necklace. Not in my room, not anywhere. But it didn't matter. The damage was done. I wasn't punished. I was erased. Dinner alone, no rides, no friends. Just silence. And Calla, smirking in the hallway, like the universe had finally aligned in her favor. That's when I learned the truth. In my family, image mattered more than facts. And they'd already picked their golden child. College was supposed to be my reset. It wasn't. It started with whispers. Then, one day, my roommate shoved her phone in my face. "Did you see this?" A student blog post. The real Rowena Clade. The girl who lies, steals, and plays the victim. No author, of course. But the tone? I knew it like a scar. She manipulates professors. Ask her about the necklace her family never got back. My stomach dropped. My inbox dried up. Project partners vanished. A professor pulled me aside. Perception matters. I wanted to scream, but I'd learned. It doesn't matter what's true, just what people think is. That post cost me a research grant. Almost made me quit school. I couldn't prove it was Calla, but I knew. She didn't just want to win. She needed me to lose. I thought I'd moved on. Buried all that. Until last night. Until that envelope reopened the wound that never really healed. Back home, I pulled up the old blog. Didn't think it would still be live. It was. Still online. Still poisonous. No tears this time, just fire. "They never cleaned up the mess," I whispered. "They never thought I'd come back to find it." I screenshotted everything. Saved server data. This wasn't nostalgia. This was evidence. Because that 16-year-old girl, the one they silenced, she'd been waiting, watching, growing teeth. And now I've got the shovel. The irony hit hard the next morning. I wasn't even looking for it, just sipping coffee, half awake, scrolling through emails, when a LinkedIn notification popped up. Congrats to alumna Calla Moore for her groundbreaking research featured in the Leaders in Wellness Spotlight. My stomach dropped. I clicked the article, already bracing for impact. Sustainable Solutions in Community-Based Nutritional Support. My title, word for word, the phrases, the model, the exact conclusion I spent months refining. Every line lifted, scrubbed of my name, and stamped with hers. There she was, beaming beside the article, polished, radiant, like life had only ever handed her green lights. "You've got to be kidding me," I whispered, but of course she wasn't. Calla had always gotten away with it. And our parents? They'd just nod, beam, and say, "She's gifted, honey. Maybe take notes." They never asked where her talent came from. Back in college, I was barely staying afloat, tutoring at sunrise, stocking shelves past midnight, living off cold ramen and campus Wi-Fi. My thesis was everything. 8 months of work, a nutritional model for underserved neighborhoods, built from real community data. One night, Calla dropped by, said she was just in the area. I was exhausted, proud, starving for validation. "I think this could actually win something," I told her. "Maybe even that Women in Health Sciences scholarship." She smiled. Too soft, too sweet. "Wow, you did all this?" I should have known. A week later, my research folder vanished from the student drive. IT found nothing, no log, no trace. I submitted an old backup, half done. It bombed. Guess who won the scholarship? Calla Moore, they announced at the spring gala. My name wasn't even listed. She waved. My parents clapped in the front row. Someone behind me muttered, "She's just on another level." I smiled like I wasn't breaking in half. I never told anyone. Who would believe me? The tired, angry sister? The girl barely passing biostats? "She earned it," Mom said when I brought it up. "She works harder than you think," Dad added. "You could learn from her." I did. Now, 10 years later, I printed the LinkedIn article and slid it into a manila folder, already thick with receipts. Screenshots of her anonymous blog posts, suspicious transcripts, sketchy financial records. That fake smile she wears like it's bulletproof. This wasn't about revenge. It was about proof. For me. To know I hadn't imagined it. That the lies were real. That they didn't forget me. They erased me. I added a sticky note to the folder. This is where her story ends. Still, I didn't comment. Didn't forward it. Didn't say a word. I waited. Because I've learned, when someone sets a trap for you, the smartest move is to pretend you didn't see it. Then show up anyway. Let them shine. Let them get comfortable. I'll be the one holding the switch when the lights go out. She wore the crown, but I built the throne. And now, I'm coming to take it back. I didn't expect an old photo album to rattle me. It was just supposed to be part of the prep, gathering context, gathering proof. But as I clicked through a buried Facebook album titled More Family Memories, something snapped loose in my chest. It was the smiles that gave it away. Too white, too perfect. Each frame felt like a page from a catalog. Holiday sweaters in forced harmony, Easter brunches with pastel lies. The background changed, but the script never did. And she was always at the center. Vivian. My mother didn't smile. She presented. Her jaw was always tight, her eyes rehearsed. Even back then, she made it look easy to stage a perfect life while making sure no one saw the blood under her nails. Her words rang in my ears, that same tired phrase she tossed around like air freshener. "We don't air our family's mess in public." Right. We just bury it under matching napkins and crystal goblets. I used to think she just didn't love me. But now I see it clearer than ever. She didn't hate me. She managed me. Like a campaign manages its scandals. She had always been the one pulling strings. Not in bursts of rage, but with a scalpel. Clean, precise, always in control. My father may have delivered the harsh words, and Calla the stabs in the back. But the choreography? The way our family twisted around appearances and silence and shame? That was all Vivian. and I had danced to her tune for far too long. One memory in particular wouldn't let go. I was 14. We were at a gala for the hospital foundation. I'd practiced my little speech for weeks. Nothing big, just a thank you on behalf of the Moore girls. Something about community and opportunity. I stood there in a borrowed dress that itched at the seams, trying to remember the words. I stumbled. Not even badly, just lost my place for a second. I saw her smile tighten like a crack in glass. After I walked off stage, she grabbed my arm. Hard. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? She hissed through clenched teeth. My fingers went numb from her grip, but her face never changed for the cameras. When we got home, she didn't yell, she cut. You made us look careless. If you can't perform, you shouldn't volunteer. Calla would have never embarrassed me like that. That was the night I stopped performing for her. But some part of me kept hoping she'd notice me anyway. Maybe that's the cruelest part, when you stop expecting love but still ache for approval. I closed the photo album and opened a document I hadn't touched in months. The file labeled Family Patterns. It wasn't evidence, not legally, but it was proof. My proof. The interviews Calla gave over the years, they echoed phrases Vivian used constantly growing up. Excellence is the bare minimum. Real strength is staying quiet under pressure. It wasn't just coincidence. Vivian didn't raise Calla. She wrote her. She didn't favor Calla because she loved her more. She favored her because Calla played the role better. Compliant, camera ready, willing to be molded. Me? I asked questions. I broke choreography. I refused to smile when it felt fake. So she tried to snip me out of the frame. Well, not anymore. I added more to the folder. Photos, clips, articles. Then I opened a new email window and paused. The cursor blinked. You taught me to be silent, I whispered, the words bitter on my tongue. Now you'll hear everything I've held back. I typed slowly, deliberately. Subject line: regarding Moore family reputation. I attached my notes, a handful of curated records, and a short summary. Then I sent it. The recipient? A journalist named Becca Lane. We'd worked together once, years ago, when I helped her expose corruption at a supplement chain. She owed me a favor. She also had no problem burning powerful families to the ground. I didn't need her to publish anything. Not yet. But I needed her to know the story was real. Because if my mother taught me anything, it was how to keep your face still while everything behind it burns. But she forgot one thing. I learned how to weaponize silence. She taught me how to smile through pain, but forgot I learned how to weaponize silence. I thought I'd unearthed every secret there was to find. But then came the envelope. No return address, no handwriting I recognized. Just a plain white envelope in my mailbox, sealed with purpose. Inside, folded neatly between two generic sheets of copier paper, was a DNA report. At first, I didn't process it. I skimmed the header. Private Genetic Screening. Pacific Diagnostics, 2015. Then my eyes locked onto the result at the bottom. Inconclusive maternal match. My heart stuttered. I read it again. And again. The name listed under subject was mine. Rowena Clade. The maternal sample? Vivian Moore. I felt the floor shift under me. My body reacted before my mind could catch up. Heat flushed through my chest, my skin cold and clammy. No stamp, no note. Just that one phrase, inconclusive. I sat down, hard. It was fake. I knew it in my bones. But that didn't matter. Not when it had already done its damage. I opened my old records drawer, the one I almost never looked at. Buried under tax returns and expired IDs was the last legal correspondence I'd received from the Moore estate's attorney. A scanned copy of the revised will, dated just 6 months after that DNA report. My name, gone. I wasn't just cut out of the will, I was erased from the lineage. This wasn't just banishment, this was extermination. Vivian didn't want me to walk away. She wanted to burn the bridge so thoroughly that even the ashes couldn't whisper my name. That day, I remembered something I hadn't let myself revisit in years. It was 2016. I was 23. I'd called the family lawyer, more out of desperation than hope, asking about my grandfather's inheritance, the one he'd once told me I'd receive, no matter what your mother thinks. I never got a call back. Weeks later, the accountant emailed me with a single line. You are not listed as a beneficiary on file. I assumed it was punishment, that they were still angry I'd left without a goodbye. I blamed myself. Now I know the truth. My own mother manufactured a lie so clinical, so clean, no one questioned it. Why would they? People believe paperwork. They believe doctors and seals and signatures. They don't believe daughters who were always difficult. But Vivian forgot one thing. Lies leave trails. And I've learned to follow them. With Jareth's help, we tracked the clinic. Pacific Diagnostics had closed 3 years after that report was dated. No surprise, it turned out to be a shell company, flagged for financial irregularities. One of the doctors listed on the form had his license revoked for falsifying lab results. A payment surfaced, $5,000 wired to a private P.O. box weeks before the report was filed. The sender? Vivian Moore. She didn't just want to forget you, Jareth said quietly, his hand resting on my back. She wanted the world to forget you ever existed. I didn't cry. I expected to, but something inside me had already died long before the paperwork showed up. I was done grieving. This wasn't the kind of hurt you wept over. This was the kind of betrayal you sharpened into strategy. That night, I sat at my desk, pulled out my laptop, and began drafting a message. It wasn't a rant. It wasn't a plea. It was a reckoning. Clean, final, impossible to misread. Subject, I know. I wrote, I know about the test. I know about the lie. And I'm done playing the daughter you tried to delete. I paused, then added one last line. Undo it, or I'll do it publicly. No threats, no theatrics, just truth with a spine. I hit send, and I smiled, because for the first time in years, the silence that followed wasn't mine to carry. She tried to erase my name, but now, the grand solace shimmered like a lie made of glass, too perfect, too polished, like no one inside had ever tasted shame, which made it the perfect stage. I walked through the lobby with my head high, wearing a navy silk dress that clung just right, backless and unapologetic. I didn't come to blend in. I came to be seen. The ballroom doors swung open, and just like that, every eye in the room landed on me. The hum of conversation faltered. A few gasps. Champagne flutes paused mid-air. Vivian's hand twitched, her perfectly manicured fingers tightening around her crystal stem. Her face didn't break, but her eyes said everything. She wasn't supposed to come. Calla looked up from her seat near the stage. Her smile strained. It cracked at the edges, like something brittle left out in the cold too long. And Desmond, God, Desmond! His jaw clenched the second he saw me, like memory hit him harder than he expected. I took a slow step forward, then another, letting the quiet stretch. You didn't expect me to RSVP, I said, voice even, eyes locked on my mother. I didn't. I just arrived. I wasn't here for forgiveness. I was here for the reckoning. Dinner continued, but the air stayed heavy. The clinking of silverware sounded like distant thunder. People whispered, pretending not to stare, but they all did. The toast began. Calla's best friend stood, glass raised, gushing about love, resilience, destiny. I let her finish, let the polite applause settle. Then I stood. I'd like to say a few words, I announced, stepping up beside the speaker. Calla's smile dropped like a shutter. I held up my glass. To truth, I said, letting the pause hang like a blade. And those who fake it. The silence was instant. Even the music stopped. I turned to my sister. Calla, I said sweetly, where exactly did you earn your MD? Her lips parted, but nothing came out. Just a stammer, a slight shake of the head. I only ask, I continued, pulling a small folder from my clutch. Because this transcript you submitted to the Health Advisory Board. It's interesting. I handed it to Desmond, who accepted it without a word. It says you graduated with honors from Pacific University. Problem is, the course codes don't match their curriculum, and you never submitted a final capstone. Also, your GPA? Inflated. By quite a bit. Kala's voice finally cracked through the tension. This is insane. This is not the time or place. Vivian stood then, her voice sharp, trying to take control. Enough of this. Rowena, if you had an ounce of class. I turned to her, calm as ice. Class? You forged a DNA test to disinherit me. Sit down. Gasps spread like wildfire. I looked back at Kala. You built your entire career on a lie, a medical lie, while real people trusted you, believed in your expertise. Desmond's hands trembled as he scanned the document. He looked up at her slowly. Is this true? Kala didn't answer. She couldn't. He dropped the papers onto the table and stepped back. I defended you, he said, voice low and tight. God, I defended you to everyone. Kala reached for him. Des, baby, please don't let her ruin this. She didn't ruin it, he snapped. You did. And with that, he walked out. Kala tried to follow, but no one moved with her. The room remained still. Her audience evaporated. Her perfect image cracked under the weight of her silence. I didn't stay for dessert. I walked out of that ballroom without a glance back. Outside, the night air was crisp, cold against my skin, but I welcomed it. I breathed it in like clarity. My phone buzzed in my bag. A voicemail. I didn't need to listen. I already knew the tone. Tight, venomous, calculated. Vivian always did hate losing control. I deleted it without opening it. Above me, the sky stretched dark and open. I looked up and smiled. That was just the beginning. I didn't tremble. I didn't second guess. They built a house of mirrors, and I just threw the first stone. The message landed in my inbox at 6:14 a.m. No subject line, no sender name I recognized. Just one sentence. I remember you. You deserve to know what really happened with Kala's suspension. My pulse kicked. I clicked. An attachment loaded. A redacted hospital incident report dated back to 2017. Patient. Male, age 9. Diagnosis. Mild asthma. Overnight observation. Outcome. Induced coma due to incorrect dosage of epinephrine. Attending. Dr. Kala Moore. Status. Case dismissed. No charges filed. No charges. No accountability. Just a buried scandal and a clean slate. I blinked at the screen, barely breathing. Attached to the email was a short note. She wasn't supposed to be near a pediatric floor, but they pulled strings. I couldn't say anything back then, but maybe you can now. My hands trembled, then steadied. This wasn't just about me anymore. I saved the files, encrypted them twice, and moved. Fast. By noon, an anonymous tip landed in the inbox of 3 independent Seattle health watchdog blogs, the kind of outlets that thrived on whistleblowers and weren't afraid of lawsuits. I didn't sign my name. I didn't need to. But I also didn't stop there. I opened a new message. To Dr. Thomas Kellner. Subject, More residency reinstatement. Clarification needed. Would you like to clarify how your star resident was reinstated without a formal hearing after a pediatric incident with long-term trauma effects? I'm attaching records you may have forgotten to review. I didn't need him to reply. The silence from institutions is always louder than their words. By the following morning, Kala's profile was scrubbed from the hospital's website. Social media lit up like a spark to dry leaves. Dr. Kala Moore removed from pediatric center list. Why? Unconfirmed rumors about malpractice in 2017 resurface. I watched from my laptop, coffee in hand, the way one might observe a building being demolished. Controlled, necessary, satisfying. At 3:42 p.m., Vivian showed up at my door. She didn't knock. She pounded. I opened it calmly, stepped aside. "You've gone too far," she hissed, barely inside. "This is your sister's wedding week." "This is accountability week," I said, arms crossed. "You're destroying her life." "She put a child in a coma." "No charges were filed." "Because you made sure of that." Her eyes flared. "You don't understand the pressure she was under." "No, you don't get to twist this into some sad little pity story. You protected her lies and buried a family's pain just to keep your name clean." Her hand trembled as she pointed at me. "You always wanted to be the martyr. But this? This is disgusting." And what do you call what you did to me?" I asked, voice steady. "You faked a DNA test. You let them believe I didn't belong in my own family. You made me invisible. And now you're mad I finally made myself seen." She stared at me, breathing heavy, fury pouring off her in waves. Behind her in the hallway, I noticed Gregory. Quiet. Still. For once, not defending, not posturing, just absorbing. His silence said more than his words ever could. "You think this makes you powerful?" Vivian snapped. "You think being vindictive makes you righteous?" "No," I said, walking to the door and opening it wide. "But telling the truth makes me free." She didn't move. "I won't be quiet again," I added. "So unless you came here to confess something, you can leave." For a long moment, she stood there. And then, without a word, she walked out. I closed the door behind her, turned, and exhaled. I called the number from the email. The nurse, her name was Teresa, picked up after 3 rings. "I wanted to say thank you," I said. There was a pause. Then her voice, soft but firm. "Someone had to speak up." I just didn't expect it would be the sister. "Neither did they," I replied. This wasn't revenge. This was justice they thought would never come. And it's only just arrived. The file landed on my desk like a quiet detonation. It wasn't printed on heavy stock paper or stamped in red. It was simple, clean. Legal audit results compiled by Jareth's firm. Neatly organized, with tabs and dates. No dramatics, just devastating facts. Wire transfers from the Moore Family Clinic. Reimbursements, medical equipment purchases, charitable donations. Every last one tagged under my name. Payee, Rowena Clade. There were IRS filings in years I hadn't earned a dime. Returns I never submitted. Refunds I never saw. The first transaction dated back to when I was 19, living on energy bars and sharing a studio apartment with 2 roommates and a mold problem. I didn't have a credit card, let alone a reason for a $42,000 medical consulting fee. They used me as a shield while I was eating ramen in a shared basement, I muttered, voice dry. Jareth stood behind me, arms crossed. They tied your identity to at least 4 shell accounts. If this hadn't been flagged in a forensic sweep, the IRS would have come for you next year. I couldn't speak. There's a difference between being abandoned and being exploited. One leaves you hurt. The other leaves you gutted. They didn't just cast me out. They built a financial firewall from the ashes of my existence. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I moved. Because I finally had the final brick, and I was going to take the whole damn tower down with it. The Moore Foundation Gala was black tie, media heavy, crawling with donors and legacy families. I didn't have an invite. I didn't need one. I wore black. Slipped in through a side entrance, past catering trays and wine lists, and the rot of polished corruption. Gregory was mid-speech when I walked onto the stage. The room hushed like someone had pulled a fire alarm. He blinked, confused, until recognition dawned. Vivian froze mid-sip. Calla flinched. I smiled, microphone in hand. "Before you donate tonight," I said, slow and calm, "you might want to know where your money's been going." Gasps echoed as I handed a USB drive to the AV tech behind me. Screens around the ballroom flickered, then filled with spreadsheets, emails, bank logs. One labeled file read, Rowena Clade Consulting. Beneath it, a signature, G. Moore. People murmured. A few stood, One donor's wife whispered, "Is that her real daughter?" Vivian turned pale. Gregory reached for the mic. "This is a mistake. These documents. This is clearly doctored." "Actually," a voice said from the crowd, "they're not." Jareth. He stepped forward, suit crisp, expression unreadable. "Our firm submitted the originals to the IRS and the State Attorney General." Gregory's mouth snapped shut. Then Desmond appeared beside him. "And to the medical board," he added, "because I won't stand behind frauds anymore." Vivian tried to salvage it. She reached for Calla, but Calla pulled her hand away, glaring. "How could you drag me into this?" she hissed. Row by row, the audience turned on them. The once perfect Moore family, Seattle's elite, unraveled in front of donors, press, and legacy families. Right there under the chandeliers they loved so much. I didn't flinch, didn't move, just stood there in the storm of their collapse, steady as stone. They had the money, the status, the lies, but I had the truth. And it was louder than all of them. I didn't wait for the fallout. I didn't linger for applause. I walked out. Outside, the air was cold but clean, the kind of crispness that made everything before feel suffocating. My heart pounded, not from nerves, but from release. This moment wasn't revenge. It wasn't fury. It was peace. It was truth, finally unchained. I looked up at the sky, the city skyline twinkling like it was in on the secret with me. "And truth," I whispered, "is finally enough." I wasn't trying to destroy them. I just stopped protecting them, and they did the rest. 2 weeks later, my world was quiet. Not the eerie kind of silence that follows an explosion. Not the numb, shell-shocked stillness that feels like it's waiting for something else to fall apart. This was peace. Sunlight streamed through my bedroom window. For once, I didn't wake up dreading a phone call, a headline, or a lawyer's letter. No reporter had camped outside. No call from Vivian. Not even a burner text from Calla. Just air, still and clean. I padded barefoot to the balcony, coffee in hand, robe loose around my waist. The city below kept moving, but up here, it felt like time paused for me. Is this what healing feels like? Not a roar. A hum. I sipped my coffee and let it settle into me. The old Rowena would have second-guessed it. Waited for the other shoe. Searched the sky for signs of smoke. But not this time, because nothing was left to burn. I still hadn't deleted the voicemail. I don't know why. Her voice crackled slightly, too tight, too furious. "You've humiliated us. You'll regret this. I don't know who you think you are, but you will answer for what you've done." But it was the last line that stayed with me. Not the words. The sound. A catch in her throat. Almost like pain. Almost. It wasn't an apology. Not even close. It was still control, even now. Still spinning her narrative, even in defeat. But it didn't sting anymore. Calla never called. Not a single text, not even a fake, "Are you happy now?" voicemail. I didn't expect her to. Desmond, though, surprised me. He sent one message. "I didn't know. I'm sorry." I stared at it for a long time before typing back, "I know. I believe you. But I don't need anything from you anymore." And I meant it. Letting go doesn't always come with closure. Sometimes it just comes with choice. Gregory's medical license was under suspension. The clinic was frozen, pending a full investigation. IRS audit teams had started combing through 12 years of reports. Vivian had gone dark. No interviews, no charity appearances, no statements. And Calla? Word was, she left the city. Quietly, probably hoping to rebuild somewhere no one knew her name. I wasn't gloating. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't anything. I was watching. Because when people fall, it's easy to cheer or pity. But sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply witness. That's enough for me. That afternoon, I walked into my office downtown. My staff, my people, smiled, greeted me with warmth, respect, no fear, no gossip, just community. Miriam showed up that evening, my first real boss. the one who handed me a broom instead of a lecture when I was 17 and homeless. She brought flowers. Sunflowers, actually. "You made it out," she said, her voice cracking just slightly. "I had to," I told her. There was no air left in there. Jareth took my hand across the dinner table that night. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. "You did what no one else could, Ro," he said finally. "You gave them every chance. And when they still chose power over love, you didn't let them take you down with them." I nodded, too full to speak. Not with food, with clarity. Because I had spent years thinking justice had to look like punishment. But maybe it looks like release. And maybe freedom doesn't always come with forgiveness, but it comes. And when it does, it feels like standing barefoot in sunlight, with no one else deciding your story for you. They may never say sorry, but I no longer need to hear it. I am free. And maybe that's what healing really looks like. Not fireworks, not dramatic finales. Just waking up and realizing you're no longer fighting to be seen, heard, or loved by people who only ever wanted to shape you into something they could control. If my story touched something in you, if you've ever been silenced, cast aside, or made to feel like your worth depended on someone else's approval, I want you to hear this. You don't owe anyone your silence. You don't have to keep carrying the weight they dropped on you. You don't have to protect those who never protected you. You are allowed to speak up, to step away, to rebuild. And yes, even to thrive without ever hearing, "I'm sorry," because forgiveness is powerful, but freedom? Freedom is everything. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever been in a situation where walking away was the bravest thing you did? Or maybe you're still holding on. What's stopping you from letting go? Drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from. If this story hit home for you, type 1 in the comments so I know it reached the right hearts. If it didn't resonate, I'd still love to hear why and where you're tuning in from. Your voice matters, your story matters. And you're not alone. If you want more stories like this, real, raw, and rooted in truth, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes, all it takes is one story to remind us we still get to write our own. Let me know if you'd like this turned into a narration script or animated scene voiceover.